If you're not an alien, subscribe.
A mere 12 years after the Civil War ended with renegade victory, a new baby boom was pushing out new colony efforts. With the exception of the war against the Zrelvians, humans had not attempted to take any world belonging to another race, the world that had become Fortress Ferocity being that exception. This was due more to pragmatism than morality. The war against the Zrelvians had taught them the expense and logistical difficulties of interstellar war, and why they had not attempted to make the Zrelvians as vassals or make them pay tribute. Ironically, perhaps they should have, as it would have worked better with Zrelvian psychology than human. The Civil War had only reinforced the consequences of war, both in lives and money. But, to their astonishment, some species didn't mind sharing their worlds, or at least didn't feel the need to claim the entire world they were on. The Yikarin, swamp-dwelling reptilians, had many worlds where the colder latitudes were not to their liking for habitation. Nor did they mine for resources in those areas beyond need. So, when the human expansion wave began to encroach on their outermost colonies, the Yikarin were willing to make limited land deals. The first Yikarin world to host a human enclave, when translated, was called Silver Star Home. Humans actually somewhat respected that name and called the planet Silver. The initial colonists were a mere 300, with another 5,000 arriving 3 years later. At least to start, they would not build the usual cityscape, instead burrowing into a mountain range and setting up habitation within. Skelsey was young by Yikarin standards, wide-eyed and naive, and curious. Yikarin breed slowly by human standards, but they are much less prone to diseases or other early untimely ends. So their population had grown slowly but steadily over the millennia, but they could not abide the cold. "Why on earth do you want to visit the outsiders?" her sire wanted to know. "They are called humans," Skelsey protested. Her sire shook his head. "Answer my question, hatchling." Skelsey ignored the insult with an effort. "They are interesting and new, and they've no love for the Zrelvians." "No one has any love for the Zrelvians," her sire answered. "But the outsiders are even more frightening, and the cold. I'll be wrapped up warmly. The human enclave is warm enough inside, and they won't harm me." Her sire made an unhappy bubbling noise. "You don't know that. Their attacks on the Zrelvians were retaliation for the Zrelvian hunting them, you know that, but disproportionate to the Zrelvian hunts in terms of violence, and then they fought amongst themselves after." This point Skelsey had to at least acknowledge. "And they are tired of such, father. They want peace and allies." Now her sire snorted in disbelief. "Ah, youth, you honestly think you can be an ambassador to their kind?" He didn't even have to mention she had no official sanction for such. Official Yikarin-human relations were politely neutral. Some Yikarin, like her sire, were uneasy about granting the humans territory on their own worlds. "Ah," she countered, "old age and cynicism. I think I can foster goodwill, and we need to learn more about them." Now it was her sire's turn to ignore the insult. "You think you can learn more about them than our intelligence services?" Skelsey gurgled a laugh. "Considering the human stealth abilities, I can hardly do worse." She paused. "You could forbid me to go." Her sire paused, then made a frustrated noise. "I just worry, and I appreciate it." The human enclave, on the other hand, were sure that Skelsey was a spy. They found this vaguely amusing, since the enclave was hardly going to tell her anything humanity didn't want the Yikarin to know. They permitted it. Skelsey's trip through the cold climes to the enclave was expensive, and her sire had refused to help pay for it, another sign of his disapproval. She had to use the old ground transport rather than flight. The humans thought this part of her cover. At first, arriving outside the enclave in the northern mountain range, Skelsey looked around, confused and nervous. There was no one to meet her, nor even any guard at the outer snow-locked door, a large, imposing thing built into the mountainside. "Welcome," said a voice. Skelsey turned slowly. She should have expected this. A shadow materialized out of the white, snowy void. Then the shadow grew a face and piercing eyes. Skelsey Pew Eat Lanil, the human said formally. Welcome to Winter Dawn. I am Sam Lionel, and will be your guide within. Thank you, Skelsey said, and extended a claw in the human fashion. Sam smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. He took her claw in his hand and shook, firmly. The snowlock door groaned open, and they went inside.